During the election campaign, the Prime Minister referred to India's 200 million Muslim citizens as infiltrators. He said they have more children than the rest of us. He repeatedly alleged that they would benefit from reservations deliberately snatched from OBCs, SCs, and STs. He's been widely criticized for this, but the Prime Minister not only has not apologized, he's made no explanation for what he said. How do you view these comments?
I'm upset on behalf of my fellow citizens, Muslims and Hindus and Christians and Jains and Buddhists and other sects. And it's a terrible remark to make. And you mentioned that the Prime Minister has not apologized for it. I think he should.
You think he should apologize to the country? In other words, you believe he owes the country an apology?
Yeah, of more than 1 billion people, 200 million happen to be Muslim. He can't get away insulting them and therefore insulting us.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire and the latest in our occasional series of interviews with outstanding Indians on how they view the election results and how they view the third Modi government. And my guest today is truly special. He's a professor of economics at Harvard University, a former Master of Trinity College, Cambridge, and a Nobel Laureate, Amartya Sen. Professor Sen, when you first found out that the BJP had lost its majority, that it had fallen to its worst result in 10 years and cannot form a government without support from other parties, what were the first thoughts that went through your mind?
The first thoughts were connected with the downfall of BJP. Whether they got majority or not was in some ways a minor issue, though in practice, in politics, it's really very important. But I was concerned for a long time how a country, India, which is a secular country, and I don't mean only secular state, a country which tolerates different religions and is against terrorizing minority groups, how they could take that. That, I think the election results indicated that there's a lot of disquiet about it, nowhere more so than the Hindi and Hindu heartland of UP. And that was, to me, a confirmation that I wasn't mistaken in judging the country to be ultimately secular and unhappy with imposing a rule on minority groups whereby they have to be under the sovereignty of the majority, rather activist Hindu rule.
So you interpreted the result as a rejection of the BJP's ambition to make India a Hindu Rashtra. Is that right?
Absolutely so. You know, there are, if we go on discussing things, I would mention that there are other faults of the BJP government, including the enormous increase in inequality between the rich and the poor, and neglect of the interests of the poor, nowhere as clearly seen as the way the poor were treated at the time when the COVID epidemic devastated India. But I think the big thing to me was this recognition that India will not tolerate being a divided country whereby minorities are treated in a way that it does no credit to the majority Hindu group.
Now, Narendra Modi has publicly claimed that he has a mandate for a third term. He insists that he's equaled Jawaharlal Nehru's record of winning 3 consecutive terms. Do you accept that boast, or do you think he's exaggerating?
I think that's really hokum, because Jawaharlal Nehru had sequentially mandate to run the country as prime minister. Not that everything he did was right, but somehow the population gave him the mandate to continue. The mandate that the Indian voters have given to Modi is nothing like that. Modi doesn't have a majority. Modi cannot govern without 2 parties with it, which are basically secular parties. And so I would say that comparison is really completely inaccurate.
Now, during the campaign, Professor Sen, the Prime Minister claimed he was not of biological birth. He said he had been sent by God to do God's work. Do you accept that?
I will have difficulty accepting a story of that kind. No, I don't accept that. And to me, the interesting point isn't whether it's true or not. Obviously, it's not true. The question is, how did it occur to the Prime Minister to make a claim as audacious as that to a country which is critically reflective of what leaders tell us?
Tell me something. What sort of man publicly proclaims he's not of biological birth? What sort of man publicly proclaims that he's been specially sent by God to do God's work? Is this some sort of megalomania?
Well, it could be either megalomania or it could be a tendency towards delusion. And delusion are not as uncommon as people tend to think. So we have to know whether Modi himself believes in this extraordinarily, impossibly inaccurate story, or whether he is using it in order to impress the population at large. And if it's the former, then that indicates a certain lapse of mind. If it's the latter, it shows a level of cunning, which is not terribly appropriate for a democracy where they ultimately vote and so on to judge them.
During the election campaign, the Prime Minister referred to India's 200 million Muslim citizens as infiltrators. He said they have more children than the rest of us. He repeatedly alleged that they would benefit from reservations deliberately snatched from OBCs, SCs, and STs. He's been widely criticized for this, but the Prime Minister not only has not apologized, he's made no explanation for what he said. How do you view these comments?
Well, I think this is a case where we have to see the limitation of Modi's mind, because that kind of a extraordinarily nasty statement about 200 million of the citizens of the country, which he pretends to lead would indicate that there is something deeply wrong in the thinking about India that the leader of the politics of India today seem to believe. So I don't know really where to begin other than being upset. And I'm upset on behalf of my fellow citizens, Muslims and Hindus and Christians and Jains and Buddhists and other Sikhs. And it's a terrible remark to make. And you mentioned that the Prime Minister had not apologized for it. I think he should.
You think he should apologize to the country? In other words, you believe he owes the country an apology?
Yeah, of more than 1 billion people, 200 million happen to be Muslim. He can't get away insulting them and therefore insulting us because they are part of the citizenry of India. And any attempt to deny that, change the citizenship law, all of which have been attempted, would be a terrible thing. So I think on behalf of Indian citizens, including Muslims, but not just Muslims, the citizenry in general, I have a right to demand that we, the citizens of India, not be insulted in this way.
Professor Sen, what do you make of the fact that the government doesn't have a single Muslim minister? Not one. Equally importantly, what do you make of the fact that the National Democratic Alliance, the ruling alliance, doesn't have a single Muslim Lok Sabha MP? What message is that sending out to India's 200 million Muslim citizens?
Well, it sends out a message that the leadership is not particularly fair-minded and does not want the representation of Muslims in the corridors of power. That's a terrible recognition. It's sad, not just for Muslims, it's sad for citizens of India in general, because we live in a country which is secular and which has fairness in mind. And we already, despite all the difficulties that the Electoral Commission produced for the opposition, and they were quite big, including jailing two chief ministers, leaving one out in the last moment before the election, not giving time for electioneering. All that indicates a kind of bias that India should not be proud of. Unfortunately, the leadership doesn't seem to understand that it's in addition to the reaction that it generated abroad, including in the United States. And the fact is that the Indian population also asked the question, the very question that you asked.
Now, after losing his majority, most people hoped the Prime Minister would be more consensual and less arrogant in his style. That's clearly not the impression he's given people in the last 20-25 days. He's appointed the same ministers again. He's defied the opposition over the issue of pro tem speaker, speaker, and deputy speaker. He's taunted the Congress over the emergency, And the president's address has boasted that big reforms are on the anvil when the budget will be announced. What does this tell you about the prime minister's attitude and behavior?
Well, it indicates a lack of comprehension about what actually happened, either a lack of comprehension or huge pretension. But I think the pretension is easy to understand. If you had a majority and lose it and want people to think that you haven't lost it, then you would try to go on doing things in exactly the way that used to happen when you had the majority. The same minister, the same cabinet, the same other rulers. And that is not surprising. And in fact, probably understandable as a political tactic. But it's certainly extraordinary that the voters' verdict could not be reflected in the governance of the country.
Tell me, Professor Sen, how do you view the treatment of Arundhati Roy? She's perhaps India's most celebrated author, but permission has been given to prosecute her under UAPA, which, by the way, is a terrorist law, for something she allegedly said 14 years ago. How do you view that?
Well, I should first say she's a very close friend, and I'm a great admirer. And obviously, I'm more than a little uh, angry, shocked about the way she is being treated. Had she not been a friend, I would have the same judgment. She is indeed a great writer, and her writings have lit the world in many ways, right from the beginning of the global small thing. But I think what have to be recognized that even if Arundhati had not been the extraordinarily creative person that she is, this action would have been just dead wrong. So breaking up something from 14 years ago and making a statement about terrorist propensity of any man or woman would be a very mean way of treating someone. It's what could be in the mind of the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. I just don't know.
Would you say that this treatment of Arundhati Roy is perhaps the most worrying thing this government has done in its very brief 2022-day third term?
No, well, I wouldn't say that because most means the others are less important, which they're not. I think the treatment of Muslims, the ease with which Muslims have been ill-treated and sometimes killed, save cattle or for a perceived threat, indicates enormous laxity of judicial standard on the part of the government. Arundhati's treatment, and here I emphasize again, she's a very close friend, is a terrible thing. But it's not uniquely the most terrible thing that's happened.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel Laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Now, Professor Sen, at the moment, India faces two big crises, which are matters of great concern to the Indian people. I'm talking firstly of the conduct of eligibility exams. NEET is only one of them. Apparently, there have been 70 exams in the last 7 years which have gone badly wrong. And the second big crisis is Manipur. It's been in a state of ferment for nearly 14 months. Yet the Prime Minister has ignored both. He's had nothing to say in public about either after his re-election, and the President's address was silent on both. How do you interpret this silence on issues that matter enormously to the Indian people?
Well, I think that indicates what many of us had suspected for a long time, namely, long time of the governance by the present ruling party, is that there is a lack of a sense of justice. And there is also the exam crisis indicates there is lack of both regularity as well as fair play. All these are issues. But Karan, let me take this opportunity. You haven't asked a question on that, but I know that you have limited time. Since the subject of education has come up, the government is often talking about employment problem, and rightly it should, because the employment situation in India is dreadful. But I think the big thing to recognize is that the educability of people is very important for education of people, I should say, is very important for finding employment. Education and healthcare is a thing that has played big part in Europe in its industrialization. Education and healthcare played a big part in America, played a big part in Japan, played a big part in China, South Korea, and so on. And India has missed that. And somehow the ability to catch up on India's educational and health deficit is one of the biggest failures of the government. Now, the problem, I should say, didn't begin only with BJP. I think the previous government had also been neglectful of education and healthcare of common people. And I've written and lectured on that many times. But when they had an opportunity to correct the neglect that was clearly visible, instead of that, going for employment as it stood for a freestanding object, not dependent on how people are educated, how healthy they are, is a very big mistake. It's not surprising that the only thing that India has been able to achieve has been important in the tertiary sector, in health, in services, but not the manufacturing, even though and the agriculture made a big progress. So I would say that there are issues that go beyond the exam, and there are terrible neglect on the part of the government. But there is a bigger issue about the importance of education and healthcare.
Would you accept, Professor Sen, that the government's disregard for or even, I would say, at times, deliberate ignoring of healthcare and education is going to make a mockery of the Prime Minister's boast of Viksit Bharat by 1947. We cannot become one of the world's developed countries if our people remain unhealthy and uneducated. That has to be the primary first step.
I absolutely agree. And here, I must say, what worries me is not only things not happening, but things not being even talked of. And that indicates a level of neglect of the central engines of development, as we know, from the experience of every country which has succeeded in the world. And yes, I think you used the word mockery. I didn't, but I'm happy to go along with you to say that there's a mockery involved there.
Let me end this interview by putting two simple questions to you. The Prime Minister repeatedly says that India is a Vishwa Guru. He made the president, in the president's address, claim that India had been recognized and its stature had been acknowledged by the G7 in Italy a couple of weeks ago. So tell me, as a Harvard professor, as a former Master of Trinity College, Cambridge, as a Nobel Laureate, how does the world view Narendra Modi and how does the world view India under Narendra Modi?
Well, that's a very difficult question. I think Narendra Modi, who was viewed very negatively after uh, the Gujarat uh, uh, episode in 22. But the fact is that Narendra Modi has also been quite successful in propagating his point of view. That's actually beginning to get unstuck, and the electoral verdict is adding to that. But I think Narendra Modi is viewed right now in a way that's fragile, and that fragility has to reflect something really important, namely how India has neglected those things that makes a country successful and respectable. It fails on that, and we very much hope that when the political change comes, these issues will be addressed.
If Modi is Prime Minister for the next 5 years and continues the way he seems to have begun, what would be the apprehensions and fears you have for India?
Well, at one stage, I was very worried that Modi's depiction of India as a Hindu country was being somehow uh, absorbed by people. I'm less concerned about that now because in the vote, the election that takes place recently, the voters have indicated that the illusion is beginning to fall flat on people's credibility. So I think I would expect if it continues the way it's going, you say what would happen. Well, I hope it doesn't continue like that because we need all the things he's neglected, which is education, healthcare, the sense of justice, an aversion to inequality, and treatment of majorities and minorities in an even-handed way. We would want all of these. If Modi is able to deliver them, I would be very happy. I don't expect that will happen. So I can be only skeptical in answering your question.
Professor Sen, thank you very much for the time you've given me, and thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on the election result and the third Modi government. Take care, stay safe.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel Laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.